If you haven't noticed, there are 3 huge Leviathan skeletons around Breath of the Wild, all scattered across Hyrule and in various different regions. Today, I'm going to go over my thoughts on what happened to one of these great skeletons and who they were in past years. Let's get started. On the northwest tip of Eldin, you'll find one of the great skeletons, and through a certain side quest, you'll learn that this and 2 others were the skeletons of ancient whale-like creatures called Leviathans, but you probably already knew that. But take a closer look at this skeleton in particular. One thing that immediately stands out to me is the striking resemblance to Levias, the great spirit of the sky in Skyward Sword. To help those who don't see it, both of these creatures have a big oval-shaped head, as well as their fins, which more or less look the same, even though this one's fins aren't entirely visible. So, okay, we've established that these 2 look pretty similar, but you can't just say that they're the same based on looks alone. So let's take a closer look. If you put Skyward Sword's surface and Sky Map side by side, you'll notice that the only place Levias inhabits, the Thunderhead, is more or less above that northern tip of Lanayru and western end of Eldin. And since the land of Skyward Sword is the same as in Breath of the Wild, we can assume that Levias, being able to fly, had gone down to the surface and was either killed or died of natural causes. I'll talk more about that later, but one big problem with what I just said is that there isn't really a way for him to descend to the surface. Let me explain. Originally, the goddess Hylia made a cloud barrier to prevent any evil from making it to Skyloft. Or something like that. Now eventually I think it was broken by the time of Tears of the Kingdom, which is why we can then access the Sky Islands, but by the time you meet Levias, there are only 3 viable gates to the surface in Skyward Sword, and since he cannot leave the Thunderhead, at least in the events of Skyward Sword, as it's there to protect the Isle of Songs, he can't access any of them. Not that he'd be able to fit through them anyway, but if we're really trying to prove this to be correct, I can really only think of 2 possibilities. 1. After the events of Skyward Sword had finished, the Thunderhead had disappeared from the sky and Levias was free to roam the skies and surface. 2. Seeing as how the dragons in Breath of the Wild pierce through what seems to be the cloud barrier, it could be that Levias and the other Leviathans possessed the same capabilities, and were therefore able to penetrate the cloud barrier and reach the surface. So I guess we've acquired enough evidence to say that Levias may be the same skeleton as the one found in Eldin. But if so, what happened to him, and how did he die? Well, in the side quest Leviathan Bones, you'll find 3 researchers who tell you their theories on how each of these Leviathans died. One says a drought, the other says an ice age, and the last one says a volcanic eruption. So let's analyze all of them. Starting with the volcanic eruption, and while this may have happened, I don't actually think that it's the most likely scenario. If a volcanic eruption did happen, the surrounding area, no matter how long ago, I think would be a bit more messed up, and the actual skeleton would probably be farther away from the actual volcano. I don't really know, so I'm gonna say that that's ruled out. But how about the ice age? Seeing as though Levias can, well, fly, I do think that he and the other Leviathans would be fine as long as they have a good source of food. Then again, I probably don't really know how an ice age works, so I could be totally wrong. But then that leaves the drought, which I think is the most reasonable and sensible option, as it affects them no matter where they are or able to fly to. And I'm not saying those other events didn't happen, they definitely could have, but that most of the creatures would have been okay. Probably. So that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed, go ahead and subscribe, and if you have any other theories, let me know down in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.